Alright, so the jam track that we're going to be playing over this week is a lot of fun to play over because it's different. It's got a different kind of vibe. It's not your traditional, predictable 1-4-5 format. This has got kind of its own thing going on, but you're going to find there's actually one scale that we use through all of this, and I'll show you how to do it, and it's very easy and fun to improvise over. So I've got the lesson split into 2 videos. In this video, we'll take a look at the first half. If you want to watch the second half, get the tablature and download the MP3 jam tracks for this lesson, which I have in multiple tempos. You can get those by going to activemelody.com, go to the weekly lessons page, and do a search for EP349. Alright, so when I was writing the jam track for this week's lesson, I wanted to challenge myself to come up with something different, using some basic chords. And the reason for that is I wanted to challenge you as you're learning to improvise. It's good to be thrown curveballs from time to time. Some having songs that don't fit the typical format, that 1-4-5 format. And a lot of what we end up doing here it tends to be country based or rock or blues. And so it falls into that 1-4-5 category just because that's what you hear in most rock and blues. But what about those songs that don't follow that format and they have some weird sort of chord arrangements? How do you play over that? How do you improvise? What do you do in those situations? So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be breaking this down, and you're going to find out it's very, very basic and simple. It's going to sound maybe complicated when you hear it the first time, when you listen to that playthrough. But everything is really coming out of one scale, which would be that G minor scale. So all these chords are played in the key of G. Let me go over the chords real quick. We have a G chord, and we go to a D sharp, or an E flat chord. I know that's a weird chord to go with a G, but just bear with me. So you got the G, the D sharp, then an F, and then the C chord. So the G, F, and C chord, those are kind of basic, but then you throw in that D sharp. That's kind of a weird chord to throw in there. Now these chords do not fit together. Those would not fit in the G family. So you have to look at that as a borrowed chord. You can look that up if you want more information on what a borrowed chord is. But essentially, it's just pulling from a different key. So when we start off in the G, the key of G, then we go to that D sharp, you're kind of switching keys there. But you don't have to switch keys from a scale perspective. You can stay in your mind in the G minor scale. So the first thing I want to do is look at the G minor pentatonic scale. Now the minor pentatonic scale is a very comfortable scale for most of us because that's the one that most anybody uses as sort of a starting point. I do, for sure. If I'm improvising, especially if I haven't ever heard a song before and I'm sitting in, the first place I go is that minor pentatonic scale because you have 5 basic notes that work with just about anything once you find the key. So let's look at the G minor pentatonic scale pattern 1 first as a starting point. So if I'm playing that G chord and I'm barring on the 3rd fret, we'll let that be our root fret. Now look at that G minor pentatonic scale. Okay, so now if we take that scale and we add 2 notes to it, we're going to convert that G minor pentatonic scale into the G minor scale. There's just by adding 2 notes. So one of the notes is this note, which is an A. And then we're going to come down and add this note, which would be the D sharp. So we have... And we can keep adding them on down until you get down to the bottom of that scale. But that's what that is. Now we've got, by adding those 2 notes throughout that minor pentatonic, now we have the G minor scale. And what's interesting to me is when I play that G major chord, that first chord, I can play the G minor scale on top of it. So you listen to this. So it does work. It works on top of the G major scale. It makes it sound a little darker, a little bluesier. Now, it really works when that next chord kicks in, that D sharp, if I stay on that G minor scale, because what happens is that G minor scale becomes the D sharp Lydian mode, or D sharp Lydian scale. I don't want to get too into theory here, but I just want to throw that out for those of you that follow the modes and that whole thing. But that same scale, when you're playing a D sharp underneath it, that same G minor scale becomes the D sharp Lydian mode. So that's why that works. So you can stay in that same scale for both of those. Then when you go to the F, as long as you land on an F note, it's going to still work because those notes are shared. And then you go to the C, Now, when I come to the C, what I try to do is land on one of the notes that's in the C scale. In that case, I landed on the E. And I'll call these out as we get into them. But that's essentially what's going on there, is I'm just thinking in my head of G minor scale. And so that's all pattern 1. We could go into pattern 2, pattern 3. We can add those same 2 notes to all the patterns, and then you have this whole different way of looking at the fretboard. So we're going to be very specific about the notes that I played in the intro. I'm going to show you how to play those, and then you can take this scale in the jam track and start to improvise, and you'll be amazed at how cool it sounds playing that G minor scale on top of this jam track. So the first thing that I played, I'm going to show you how to play it first, and then we'll get into the timing of when it comes in. I'll play along with a slow version of the jam track here, and it'll make more sense. But the first thing that I should point out is I'm not using a pick when I'm playing this. I'm using my fingers with the right hand, and sometimes I just like to do that. You get a different feel. It slows me down. I can't cross pick if I don't have the pick. And because of that, I tend to play differently, and it makes me pick notes out that maybe I wouldn't have otherwise. So always kind of experiment with that. If you're a pick player, you know, put the pick down sometime and just use your index finger or your thumb and just plunk away at it. You feel a little more caveman when you do that, but sometimes that's a good thing. So what I'm doing there, the first thing would be the 3rd fret, 4th string, and then I do a hammer onto the 5th fret, 4th string. So you know where those notes are coming from now, right? G minor, well, the G minor scale. And the next thing that I played goes like this. And again, I'll go through the timing of this in just a minute, but look at these notes. So we're going to start by doing that same hammer on between the 3rd fret and the 5th fret on the 4th string. And then we're going to come up to the 3rd fret, 3rd string, then down to the 2nd fret, 3rd string. That's one of those extra notes that I was mentioning that are not in the minor pentatonic scale, but they're in the minor scale. 5th fret, 4th string, 3rd fret, 4th string, all the way down to the 5th fret, 5th string. So we have, and then the last thing there is another hammer on, just like we did at the beginning there. So between the 3rd fret and the 5th fret on the 4th string. And then a final note, which would be that 5th fret, 4th string. Alright, so I'm going to put on a slow version of the jam track, but just know when the first note comes in, it comes in on the and of 2. So you count it as 1 and 2 and. Alright, so be listening for that. Alright, so the chords underneath us at this point, we played over the G, we played over the D sharp, and now there's the F chord which transitions to the C chord, but you don't have to necessarily worry so much about the chords underneath you. Just stay in the key of the song, so just be playing that G minor scale, just be working that scale, and then your ear will tell you which notes you need to land on just by what sounds right. You'll start to get the feel for that as you improvise. In the beginning, just memorize the one I'm doing here, but when you start to take it to the next level and play over it, that's what you're going to want to do. Now this next leg goes like this. It looks complicated, but it's really not that difficult. And the way that your fingers line up, for the most part, your thumb is covering the 3rd string, index finger, 2nd string, middle finger, 1st string. So we're going to be playing, we're going to be barring the first 2 strings on the 3rd fret with our index finger. And then we're going to start the lick on the 5th fret, 3rd string, doing a full bend using your thumb. And then 1st string, 2nd string, behind the bar on the 3rd fret. So you have, and then we're going to do a full bend on the 6th fret, 2nd string. And then match that note by playing the 3rd fret, 3rd fret, 1st string. So all together then we have. Now, the next thing that happens goes like this. So we're going to come down to the 6th fret, 2nd string, 3rd fret, 2nd string, 5th fret, 3rd string, and then do a hammer on between the 3rd fret, second string and the 5th fret second string. Now some of you are going to go, wait a minute, what's this note? That's not in that minor scale, because I showed you those 2 extra notes. You had that one and that one. You didn't have this one. So why is that note in there? Well, the reason for that is because that's the point where the C chord goes by. And you know, when you're playing along with the jam track, you'll definitely hear it, and it'll make more sense. And when I was improvising and coming up with this part, my ear heard that C chord, and I could picture the C chord right here. And so there's that E note that's in the C chord. And so when I was improvising that one part, I could picture that chord and play that note. Now, the better you get with improvising, you'll be able to do that. That's a hard thing to do, and I don't do it very well, but every now and then there will be something kind of glaringly obvious, and I'll know what to do. And so I was just sort of already in position. I knew that note was in there, and I'm just picturing those notes. They sort of light up the notes of that C chord. So anyway, that's what's going on. That's why that note works. And if you can highlight the notes of the chords as they pass by, your lead sounds much more sophisticated. It sounds much more thought out and advanced. So we have... Now after that I went... So that's the 3rd fret 2nd string, 5th fret 3rd string, back to the 3rd fret 2nd string, and then down to the 3rd fret 3rd string. And then the last part of that goes, that's the 5th fret, 3rd fret, 5th fret on the 4th string. Then there's the 3rd fret, 3rd string, and then back to the 5th fret, 4th string. So that last little phrase, now that seems like a lot, but when you kind of break it down into little pieces, it's not that bad. And to me, playing that finger style, it sounds much more just chill. I don't know what the word for it. It just sort of fits that jam track. Versus flat picking that, I think it would sound, I would probably tend to rush it and maybe do more, try and do more there or something. I don't know, but I'm slowed down by using my fingers. Okay, let me back up. I'll play along with the jam track from the beginning and we'll put those 2 parts together. Okay, so now we get into my favorite part of this whole lead, and it's my favorite, I think, because it's just so simple, but it works so well, in my opinion. And really, it's not even a lead. I'm really just playing the chords. But when I landed on that last note that we just played, which was the 5th fret 4th string, the next thing I do is slide it all the way up to the 9th fret, and then look at that, and then I complete that, which would be the G chord. Now this is where the whole caged system comes into play, and knowing your chords in different positions. I'm going to assume you know how to do that because I've beat that one up over the last several lessons. But if you want a refresher, you can go back to EP349. I think it's 273 or 272. It's one of the two. But anyway, that's a caged lesson I did. But what I did here, by sliding up to that 9th fret 4th string, then I come down and I go ahead and bar the first 3 strings here on the 7th fret. And I put my middle finger down on the 8th fret 2nd string, and I'm going to play strings 4, 3, and 2. Look at that little triad there. That's a G chord. You've got a G chord here, and you've got one up here. You could look at that as using your C chord shape out of caged. But I don't need the full thing. I just need that little piece of it. Always look at chords in fragments like that, especially when you're playing lead. It can really enhance your lead to just picture a triad. So when I know there's a G chord, they should, if I'm a good improviser, I should see all these little G triads lighting up on the fretboard. And those are places I can go. I can pick notes out of those or play them as little block chords. Okay, so I came up and hit that chord. And then I walked it down, so there's my G chord. I walked that chord shape down 2 frets, which would be an F. And See, get your F. I came down to that, and then to the D sharp chord, or that E flat chord. And that's the way I played it, which I ended up making it a sus2 chord. So if I were to look at just think of caged and think of the A chord shape. So there's your A chord. If I were to just play it up here, and so that I've got my bar on, that would be the 8th fret. That would be that D sharp chord. There's your D chord. You go up one, there's your D sharp, right? Well, if I wanted to play that really cool sound, and I always think of Eddie Van Halen when I hear that. I hear him using this sus2 a lot, and I think that's probably where I got it. That's about all I can do from Eddie Van Halen, but I hear him using that a lot, and it just sounds really nice. So I've been using that through the years. Now, instead of me using the bar and doing the whole thing, I just played it like this. So I've got my ring finger and my pinky both on the 8th fret, strings 3 and 4, the middle strings. And then I've got my index finger up here on the 6th fret, strings 1 and 2. Isn't that a cool way to make that chord? It sounds very, it just fit perfect, in my opinion, over what that jam track was trying to represent. So, from when we slide up to the G, down to the F, and then we go into that D sharp sus2. And that's 4, 3, 2, 3, 1. Those are the string numbers. And then I hit it again, sort of back of my fingernails, and then I came back to the F chord. That's where the song goes to the F. And then I went. Now what's going on there? Well, the song goes from the F to the C. There's the Keith Richards. And that's what I'm doing. I'm just taking that F chord shape and then doing a pull-off with my bar there on the 5th fret, the first, and I'm only playing strings 2, 3, and 4 off of that 5th fret. And that's a C chord. See, there's your C chord using your A chord shape, right? Hopefully some light bulbs are going off and you're seeing this. So these chords, all I was doing in this whole part of it was playing the chords. G, there's the D sharp, sus2, and then to the F, 3, 4, down to the C. All right, so let's back it up from the beginning and play up to that point, and along with the slow version of the jam track. Alright, so after I play that C, then I come up here to pattern 3 of the minor pentatonic scale for G. So it's just G minor pentatonic scale G. I wasn't even thinking of the G minor scale, I was just thinking straight up blues. And so for this, and so isn't that cool that even though that's very minor, it works over a G major chord. So that's the 11th fret 2nd string. I come down to the 8th fret 2nd string, and then the 10th fret 3rd string. So when you put it together, it goes. And then we go back to the 11th, back to the 8th. So, and it just makes a loop. That would be a great takeaway lick if you learn nothing else. Pattern 3 of the minor pentatonic scale. There's pattern 1. There's pattern 2. There's your pattern 3 lick. It's just a great go-to lick. And then I came up here to pattern 4 and went. And so that's that little triangle. So that would be the middle finger on the 12th fret 3rd string, 11th fret 2nd string, 13th fret 2nd string. And then we're going to do a full bend and then release the bend without playing anything. I love that. You hear that in blues so much. All the real blues guys, and that to me, that's the difference between like an amateur blues player and a real blues player. They have full control, as opposed to hearing it go up and down isn't as dramatic as hearing it go up but not come down. So just remember that. Listen to Albert King. I mean, he's like the master of that. The bend, you don't hear it release. So anyway, that's kind of what I was going for. So full bend on the 13th fret, second string, and then we just come back to the 10th fret. Or I'm sorry, to the 11th fret, second string, and then play that note and then the 13th fret, second string without the bend. So all together. Okay, so from the beginning of that, where I come into pattern 3, it goes. And then we come up here. Okay, and then the song goes to the F. So that was the G, the D sharp, and then the song goes to the F, and I went. Now, what that is, that's kind of a Mark Knopfler lick to me. It's got a country feel to it. But what I'm doing, let me show you how to play it first. I've got my ring finger on the 13th fret, second string, middle finger's on the 12th fret, third string, and I'm using my middle finger, my index finger to pluck these strings. So what I'm doing is I'm keeping my ring finger still while I do a full bend with my middle finger on that 12th fret, third string. And then a release. And then I come down and hit that note twice, which is the 10th fret, 10th fret, third string. Now, why are those notes working? Where did that come from? Well, I knew the song went to the F. So in this one situation, this one little case here, I switched keys, switched scales rather, to match that. So I knew we're playing the F. So I was picturing the F major pentatonic scale, pattern 1. And I know that I've got all these country licks that live right there in that pattern 1. And so that's where that came from. And I just happened to be in that neighborhood, so it made sense to do that. Okay, one other thing. I'm going to play one other part. After the F chord, it goes to the C, and I went. Another kind of Mark Knopfler thing. I love this. We're actually going to end this lesson with this final lick there. It's a double stop. I'm playing strings 2 and 3 on the 5th fret, and I'm using my index finger, my middle finger to pluck that. And all I'm doing is I'm bending both strings at the same time, and I'm bending by pulling down and then releasing it with some vibrato. Now, there's different ways you could do that. Some people might put both fingers in and push it up that way, but the problem is this string ends up going too sharp, and so when I pull, I'm barely able to pull that second string, but I'm able to pull that third string a little harder, which makes it actually work and from a tuning perspective. You can't overpull it. So anyway, we're going to end it there. Let me play along with a slow version of the jam track. We'll play up to that point, play all the notes. And hopefully this is starting to make sense and little light bulbs are starting to go off out there. If you're enjoying this, join me in part 2. If you're not a premium member yet, look into it. It's very affordable, high quality lessons like this every week. So I'll play along with this and then we'll see you in part 2.